Hi guys, as of you might know, I have been reviewing the Beach Boys studio albums chronologically for the past few years, and I finally made it to the 90s. And the 90s is an interesting era for music in general, concerning the Beach Boys as well, because one large invention came along in the 90s that changed popular music, especially in music production, also in general, forever. And that is the invention of autotune. And if you don't know what autotune is, just shortly in a nutshell, it is software. There's also Melodyne and other softwares too that work in the same way to tune your vocals after the fact. So after you have recorded your vocals or any other instrument too, you can with computer change the pitch to exactly be on the line, so to speak, on the grid, as the professionals say, so that it's just pitch perfect, so that all the sort of variations of the voice and if you have sung off key or sharp or whatever, it's all corrected. And autotune can be used as an effect, kind of like Cher used in the 90s famously. Or it can be used to hide your unprofessionalism and your lack of singing skills, kind of like I do. I have used Melodyne with some experimentations, because I like to record music and sometimes sing even a little bit, even though I'm not a musician or any sort of professional. I just like to do it for me, myself, just for fun. So I kind of know how that software works and how you can mess with it and how you can make it sound really bad and how you can make it sound actually unnoticeable. Let's get to the topic of the video. The Beach Boys and autotune. And let me play a little devil's advocate over here. I know some of the things that I'm gonna say in this video are gonna be unpopular, but please hear me out and give this idea and this a little chance, this thing that I have to say. Give it a chance, please. The popular opinion is that autotune destroys all music and all soul, and autotune should never be used. And when we come to the Beach Boys world, autotune is like the next thing to Satan. It's even worse than Charles Manson for most of the fans. And it's like a curse word. And I feel that it's kind of tiresome. The whole autotune is bad thing has become a tad lame, in my opinion. And I will try to explain the reasons why. So the first Beach Boys album, from my knowledge, to have autotune studio album is, and the last one is That's What Got Me the Radio. But I know the net worth Good Time in whatever, the net worth 1980 live album by the Beach Boys, which was released in the early 2000s, that has a little bit of autotune. But as you know, we come to the actual studio albums, this is the first and the only one, for my knowing, that uses autotune. Then Brian Wilson obviously used autotune on a few of his albums, including his sort of last real full studio album, No Peer Pressure, released in 2015. And then also Mike Love has become infamous with his usage of autotune, despite of actually criticizing Brian for using autotune on Brian's albums. So we'll get into all of these and what I think about the usage of autotune in all of these three albums. Autotune is a modern tool. Well, we can't even say modern, it's been around for 30 years, but it's a tool that's used in music production worldwide, and it's just become a staple. And you can use pitch correction and autotune well, you can use it not so well. You can use it as an effect so that it's completely hearable and everybody realizes that, okay, here's something going on. But you can use it unnoticeably to correct the pitch of some vocal lines here and there, and do it so that you don't have, because the thing with autotune is you don't have to kill the whole vocal and do it soulless. You don't have to correct it to the grid. You can use it a little bit, just if there's something that's a tad too much off, you can use it just a tad, and nobody will ever notice that there's been any sort of pitch correction going over there. And let me tell you, 99% of artists for the past 20 years have used it in that way, and you will like never know that they used it. So let's get into the Beach Boys saga. People will like to claim that Joe Thomas invented autotune and brought autotune to the Beach Boys world, and the Beach Boys fans mostly they appreciate the 60s style, and everything should sound like Pet Sounds, and it should be produced like Pet Sounds. Majority. There is a minority that really love you and these quirkiness or quirky things, aesthetics and stuff like that, but the majority just really holds on to the 60s sound, and everything should sound like Pet Sounds or Summer Days and Summer Nights. And I can't blame these people that claim have these opinions, because those albums sound fantastic. That's not really the case. But the thing is, times are changing, and the production techniques have changed, and computers and computer effects and tools have become a staple in music production. And these questions or debacles about using autotune, they're not really an issue with younger artists. It's kind of funny, because these things become a problem only for some people when it comes to these older legacy acts that have been around for 100 years, like the Beach Boys, because people like to think that the Beach Boys should always sound the same. They should always be young, and they should always sound young, and they should always sing without autotune, and that's it. It should be always organic and done with, the cool musicians in the studio with magical whatever things, There's just this image, this romanticized image that it should be that way, and Brian should never use autotune, whatever, And I get it, It's because these acts have been around for so long that people just don't like the idea of, they feel like somebody else is messing with their, something that's important to them. But when a younger artist uses autotune, nobody cares. It's just, okay, that's his style. People just get it, People don't even question it. Okay. So, let's talk about Joe Thomas and autotune a little bit. Well, actually, let's not talk about Joe Thomas. Let's talk about Brian Wilson, because the thing is, this album is produced by Brian Wilson. Joe Thomas is credited as recorder, so it's recorded by Joe Thomas. But for some reason, Joe Thomas is the guy that gets the hate for using autotune. I was trying to find this interview from around 2015, because I remember that it existed. I couldn't find it now, but I think it was some sort of newspaper interview, so there wasn't audio or video. It was just a written interview with Brian Wilson during the promotion of No Peer Pressure, this album. And he was asked about the studio work and recording in studio and how that has changed compared to the 60s. And his answer was hilarious and kind of mind-blowing. I'm just paraphrasing because I couldn't find the actual interview, but I remember so vividly that he explained that, it's so much easier these days because you can just record a vocal take and then you can fix it with autotune, and it's so much faster and easier, and I love it, compared to the 60s when you had to do it so many times for hours and hours to get it just right. And I found it so hilarious because it was actually Brian revealing to be himself the guy that just loves autotune. And I can truly see that, because Brian has always been the guy that has been not only using the latest techniques of recording industry, but also being at the forefront and doing things for the first time and always using the latest tools. I think it's kind of sad that Joe Thomas is the one that always got the hate. when in fact it was Brian who was the producer on those albums and greenlit the usage of autotune. Well, some people will then claim, well, where's the autotune in Brian Wilson Presents Smile or That Lucky Old Son, because, you know, Joe Thomas wasn't involved in those. Well, I think in those cases there were other forces that were against using autotune, so mainly probably Melinda or maybe Darian or Scott Bennett or somebody else that was very close to Brian and just, you know, encouraged him to do it kind of like in the old days and, like, you know, talked him into just doing more takes instead of fixing it in post. I think that's the way it probably went. And Joe Thomas probably wasn't that guy. He probably was just more in the background and kind of just let Brian do it the way Brian wanted to do it and didn't really question it. That's why God Made the Radio. One of the biggest criticisms that this album gets is the huge amount of autotune in it that makes it unlistenable. And the Beach Boys shouldn't use autotune. And I kind of, well, I see where these people are coming from. I kind of disagree. And let me explain why. The Beach Boys and Brian Wilson have kind of used autotune since the 60s. That's one, like, Beach Boys and Brian especially have always been known for studio trickery. And back in the 60s there wasn't obviously computers, well, there was computers, but there wasn't computers used in music creation in the way that they have been using them now in the 2000s, but there was stuff like doubling, or, you know, doubling the vocals, and all kinds of trickery that you could do with the studio machines. And Brian used all the possible ways that he could manipulate the vocals. He slowed them down or, you know, made them faster to change his pitch. And when you double a vocal, you kind of change the pitch of the vocal anyhow. So that is kind of like autotune. When you do you know, 2 takes of the same line and, you know, double a vocal, it's not, the pitch is not the same with both vocals. They are a little bit different. When you combine them, you get this sort of, it's not a robotic sound, but kind of like this otherworldly sound that a human cannot produce by himself. You know, you cannot sing twice the same time. So that's already studio trickery and like unnatural, and the pitch of that vocal kind of changes because the relative pitch is then different. So I think it's kind of really silly to just say that all usage of autotune is really stupid while you still approve all these studio trickeries that the group has done since the very first recording sessions. And you know, I just don't see any difference, you know, with these techniques. They are both just techniques to record music. Well, how much autotune is too much? Well, personally, this is just an opinion, but personally, on That's Why God Made the Radio, there is a few lines that, in my opinion, have a little bit too much of autotune, and they are in this song Shelter. The verses with Brian's vocals, I think they should have redone those, because there's a few parts that the autotune effect has been used too much. It just sounds kind of robotic. Otherwise, I can enjoy the whole album through and through. The autotune is almost unnoticeable. There's like some like parts where you can kind of sense that there's some sort of tuning going on, but it's not bad at all. But then Brian released the No Peer Pressure album, and when this came out, people were super positive about the fact that, like, majority of fans were writing, "Oh, it's so cool because this album doesn't have autotune, like barely at all." People were very happy about that compared to That's Why God Made the Radio, and I actually agree. I think Brian worked even harder with the vocals on this one, and they didn't use tuning like nearly as much as on the last Beach Boys album. But there's a little bit of autotune here and there, but it's pretty much unnoticeable. But these days, it's kind of changed, that now people just say that, oh, this is just filled with autotune too, and it's unlistenable. And that's bogus. You know, it's just not true. If you actually listen to it, Brian put a lot of effort into the vocals to get them just right. And you can actually even see that on this making of videos, and all the guest stars say the same thing, that Brian was extremely accurate with the way he wanted them to sing, and make them, you know, do multiple takes. So it's just not true. That is not filled with autotune, that album. In 2017, Mike Love was criticizing, or right before the release of this one, actually during the release of No Peer Pressure, Mike was asked about if he had heard Brian's new studio album, and he said, "Oh, I'm sure it's good if it's just not filled with autotune." But then a few years later, Mike released his Unleash the Love album, his first studio album in decades. And by the way, it's not gonna be a Mike / Brian. I'm not gonna like bash Mike. That's not the point of this video. I'm just using this as an example because yeah, it's a great example compared to these two. This album, to my ears, is kind of an example of too much autotune. It is a horrendous listen because the autotune has been used in very bad ways. I'm not sure like what the idea was behind it, because it sounds really horrible. Mike doesn't sound like Mike at all on this album. He sounds like some sort of robotic AI version of Mike, kind of like what somebody would just describe Mike's voice to an AI machine, and then the AI would like generate some sort of robotic Mike Love voice. That's kind of what this sounds like. And if the Beach Boys albums and Brian's solo albums sounded the same, I would totally agree that, you know, let's leave the autotune off. But I think that with the Beach Boys releases and with Brian's solo albums, the autotune has been used in 99% of the cases very tastefully. So I cannot really see that as a problem. So anyway, I just wanted to get this out there because we are now getting closer to the like reviewing the 90s stuff and the, you know, these albums, all of these, and also this one. And I don't want to go through with the same autotune discussion with every album that has, you know, autotune in its production, because it's a really lame and tiresome discussion, and I wanted to just do a separate video about that. I know I'm gonna get probably some flack about this because it's not an popular opinion, but I just feel that the autotune is a modern technique. It's become a norm, and you know, if you approve of all the studio trickery from the 60s, you should also approve the usage of autotune, unless they go too far with it and, you know, just make it sound like super weird, like they did with this one. Then it's another thing. What you guys think about this? Let me know in the comment section. Let's continue over there. Be nice. I'm sure you are and will be. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care. Bye bye.